Hey, my name's Debbie. I am a current law enforcement student. I will be graduating spring of 2016 and hoping to get a job down here in Florida as I'm down here studying online this semester. I was asked to do this presentation because it is a final for my oral and interpersonal communication class that I will be hopefully graduating from this semester. The topic I chose was communication in law enforcement. The reason why I chose it is because it focuses on my career and what I'm going into. It helps me to more understand what I'm going into and what I'm getting myself into, as far as also knowing what I have to better myself in as far as communication in order to meet the standards in this career. The purpose of the communication is that there needs to be more consistency in communication between the officers and between the officers and citizens. After interviewing a lot of my cop friends and going on a lot of ride-alongs, I've found that there's a big lack of communication between officers and citizens due to events that have happened in the past and recently. It's hard for cops to help people out and to understand what's fully going on if the citizens don't want to communicate with them and let them know what they can help with. Communication in law enforcement is important and is needed in order to better the profession, our community, and the people that live within it. What is communication? Communication is the imparting or interchange of thoughts, opinions, or information by speech, writing, or signs. Why is communication so important in law enforcement? There are several reasons why communication is so important in law enforcement. Some of the reasons are communication is important in law enforcement because in general it makes the job easier, especially since it consists of communication. It also allows everyone to understand one another and understand what is going on in certain situations. If everyone's not on the same page, it's really hard to communicate, and communicating between one another makes the job a lot easier. It also prevents people from getting hurt or furthering any intense situations. Different types of communication in law enforcement. There's communication between the officers, communication between the officers and the citizens, and there's also communication between investigations, situations, and other situations that might involve law enforcement. Communications between officers. The reason why communication is so important between officers and themselves is because it makes reports easier to write. If everybody knows what's going on and everybody on the scene knows what's happening, at the end of the call or the scene, they have to write reports of what happened. Everybody knowing what's going on and being able to write a similar report helps the judge, helps their job, helps them look good. They can help one another out on calls and backups, letting each other know what's happening, asking for help, backing each other up is all part of communication. And it's also easier to gather information when everyone is on the same page. Again, going back to reports are being easier to write. It's easier for the cops to gather what happened at a scene if they're all communicating with one another and each other. The next one is communication between the officers and the citizens. When you have communication between the officers and the citizens, everyone is clear on what's happening on the scene, on what's happening during the situation, and it makes things a lot easier. It prevents people from getting hurt, from furthering any situation and getting critical into a situation. It prevents that. Knowing what's happening, knowing what the officers can help with people is very important. It can better the chance of situations from happening. If a cop gets called out on scene and they know exactly what's happening at that time before it gets intense, they can prevent that by talking to the citizens and the citizens communicating with them before getting upset or raging out on others. Communication during investigations and situations. This is a big part of communication in law enforcement, especially when it comes to investigations and just situations in general. They assist each other with the investigation and make the conditions easier. They communicate clear with the citizens that are involved, and they can back each other up when in dangerous situations. How can communication be increased in law enforcement? A lot of my cop friends that I talk to say that communication is lacked in law enforcement and needs to become better, even between officers, not only between the community and the officers, but between the officers themselves and between the people in the community. The three things that we're going to cover is how can the job help you increase communication, how can citizens help the communication in law enforcement, and what will better communicating do for us and others. We'll go to the first one. How can the job help you increase communication? Throughout the job, you'll gain experience. When you first start on the job, you might be a little tacky at things, especially in any job you start out at. You're very touchy with things, and you have a hard time getting things right on the first time around. But through experience during the career and being out on the job and doing it yourself, you gain experience and you gain how to communicate and what's better for people and what are their weaknesses, so you can help them, and then they can help you and find out your weaknesses as well as far as communication, and you guys can work together to communicate better. Writing reports will help you gain experience. I've seen several reports written already, especially writing my own reports throughout school. But writing reports will help you gain communication experience, because what you write, it goes to the judge, it goes to your supervisor, it goes to your sergeant. Everybody looks it over, everybody knows what's going on. And by you writing that and knowing what you're writing and knowing what you're going to talk about, it helps you communicate with others, so that when they read it, they know exactly what's going on as well. Talking with others and citizens. When you're on the job, you talk with a lot of people, you communicate with a lot of people, you interact with a lot of people, and talking to people, even just saying hi to them, or how's it going, or just knowing that you're there to help versus you're the bad person or bad cop, as most people think, helps communication within your community, especially if it's an insecure community and people don't feel safe. How can citizens help the communication in law enforcement? The citizens can help by being specific in communication and elaborate on situations. It's very hard for a cop to understand what's going on and communicate with the citizen. They don't fully know what's going on, and the citizen is not fully communicating and being very elaborate on what's going on. Instead, they're vague, and it's very hard for the cop to understand and report what's going on as well and figure out the situation. So if you're a citizen and you're talking to a cop, you need to elaborate on what's going on, talk with the cop, pretend he's your best friend, and just tell him everything that's going on, so he can help you through things. Another thing is cooperate with officers and what they ask of you to do. If an officer asks you to do something, please follow what they ask you to do. A lot of people are stupid and think they know what they're doing themselves, or they don't listen to the cop, and worse things happen as well. A cop asks you to stop, or a cop asks you to stay there. Cop asks you to stop so he can talk to you, and you run off or you disobey him. It can lead to further things as far as tasing and other consequences, even arrest. What will better communication do for us and others? It will better the law enforcement job. It'll make the officers, especially us, look more important and more overall have better experience. It'll help the community and the people. And communication in law enforcement will help the community, because we will be able to better the community. It's important to have communication. Without communication, we cannot have safe environments and safe communities. It's very true. The police are also not able to do their job without communication and aren't able to fulfill their duties in law enforcement without communication. Communication is very important in law enforcement. First of all, it helps the community and the people within the community. It keeps people safe from danger or injury and allows officers to help others and teach others within the job environment. So again, it's very important if you're a citizen and you're talking to a cop, make sure that you're very specific with what's going on so they can help you follow directions. Don't just assume what's going on. They can't help you if they don't understand what's going on as well. The last thing is I have 2 handouts that I had given you. The first one is a communication and law enforcement handout. It has some information on here on how to communicate, how police communicate with citizens, how to get other officers to communicate with one another, different types of listening. And then on the back side, there's extra tips, some resources that I had used that you can look at, and some other information. How you listen impacts your job effectiveness and the quality of your relationship with you and your community. And again, listening is the most important skill you can have. So if you are talking to a cop or a cop's trying to talk to you, just listen. It's better understanding of what's going on. The second handout is the oral and interpersonal communication audience presentation evaluation form. If you guys can fill these out at the end, that would be great. And then hand these back to me, and I will turn them into my teacher. Thanks a lot for listening.